Jarren Duran, Red Sox outfielder, gets suspended for 2 games. I want you to give me a little leeway on this, not cut me off, because I have a little bit to say about this.
Okay.
You got to be terrified of what's going to come out of me right now, because you know me well.
No.
Jarren Duran is an outfielder for the Boston Red Sox, got suspended for 2 games for telling a fan to shut up, and then called him the F slur, we will say on our podcast. I will say, of that word and of all words, I think in a journalistic environment, those words should be written and not abbreviated. This is not a journalistic environment. We are not journalists. This is a fucking dumbass podcast. I'm not going to use that word just because Jarren Duran used that word. He called someone that, and I saw like arguments about this from a free speech perspective. And you know me, I'm a free speech absolutist, essentially. I think I believe in American free speech. I believe in the First Amendment. The First Amendment has nothing to do with the Red Sox and calling one of their customers a slur. The First Amendment means that you will not be persecuted for your opinions on the government or for the things that you say. There are exceptions to that, like you could say things that are considered harassment, and that becomes a crime potentially, or at least like a civil tort. You can say things that incite violence. These are exceptions to the First Amendment. And then freedom of speech in general is something that I believe in the spirit of. And I think that most organizations in this country should at least take part in the spirit of freedom of speech. And I have supported freedom of speech on both sides of the partisan fence. Very supportive of Colin Kaepernick. Very supportive of Harrison Butker, my dear Harrison Butker. But you know me, like we had like the devil's advocate argument where I was in what Jarren Duran did. So Harrison Butker gave his opinion on what our government is doing wrong and what our society has wrong. That's within his rights to do. It doesn't have to be popular, and I applaud the Chiefs for standing by him despite saying a thing that was very unpopular in parts of NFL fan bases. Colin Kaepernick said a thing that was very unpopular in parts of NFL fan bases, and it's a fucking travesty. By the way, he's Jim Harbaugh's trying to get him on the coaching staff. Shout out to Jim Harbaugh. That's
interesting.
Amazing.
Yeah,
That's cool. Travesty he wasn't allowed to play. I think one of the NFL's greatest injustices. Free speech is free speech. I don't give a shit if I agree with it or not, right? This is not free speech, because what he's doing, and people are pissed that the Red Sox suspended him, is he called a customer of the... was it at Fenway Park, by the way?
I don't know.
I think it was at Fenway Park. He was
getting heckled basically in the on-deck circle, and then decided to reply, which is never good. It doesn't really matter. He told a customer of Major League Baseball. He called a customer of Major League Baseball a slur. Imagine any other job where you call the customer a slur and not expect there to be any retribution. I know people are on this shit of like being able to say any word you want. And to a degree, I understand the point that they make, but this is not an issue of him being like a woke, like the woke police, or being being considered a thought criminal. He called a customer of the goddamn team a slur. Yeah, I mean, it'd be like if you got caught on camera at a comedy show using that same word at somebody in the audience. Like,
I probably have a better career than I have, frankly, but
nothing. But you have to fully lean into the right.
It's different though. It's different in comedy because you can use that word and be joking. He was not joking. He said it as the slur. Yeah, meaning it hatefully. Like, maybe he didn't mean it homophobically. There is a version of that word that you and I grew up with that is not necessarily homophobic. And you don't have to say that you grew up with it.
Well, our generation in middle school was throwing that word around.
Absolutely.
We did it all the time. And the people that tend to get really upset about just the overall disappearance of these words, they're the peaked in middle school or peaked in high school guys.
Sure.
That when their lives were going the best, we freely use these types of words. And it's like, but part of changing and evolving is that we eventually phase that stuff out.
To be clear, not I don't think that Jarren Duran should lose his career for this. I think a 2-game suspension to me seems like a somewhat decent compromise. I think if this happened in 2020, he probably gets a 60-game suspension. And I think 2 games is probably closer to what he should get. This is bad behavior that hurts the brand. It hurts your team. And it doesn't fall into these things that are like the spirit of free speech, which is like being able to be Muhammad Ali, being able to be Colin Kaepernick, being able to be Harrison Butker and criticize our government and our society in a way that's meaningful and thoughtful. This is simply using a slur to insult a fucking customer of the product.
Yeah, most people's understanding of the First Amendment is in line with most people's understanding of HIPAA. Which in my experience, I at a previous point in my life worked very closely with HIPAA and have a very good understanding of it. And almost everybody does not understand it.
Sure.
The general consensus, just like the First Amendment, everyone's like, I can say whatever I want and there's no consequences. And if there are consequences, then you're violating my rights.
Yeah.
And by the same contrast, with HIPAA, everybody's like, if anybody shares anybody else's medical records, then they are violating HIPAA. It's like, that's not exactly how it works. It's just, I mean, we've talked about this before, but like the way, I mean, you're kind of like this too, but in a more practical sense, people just want everything to be black and white. If it exists within this rule, it needs to stay within this rule. It's like, that's just not how the world works. You kind of look at it pragmatically where you're like, I'm on the side of however we've drawn this up and I'm cool with it as long as we all decide to abide by it. Where I think a lot of people who, are out there, railing against free speech and things like that, they want the rights, all the legal freedoms that we have to just work in their favor all the time.
Nobody thinks of free speech as something that they are against. They think of it as things where they know the exceptions that should be made. Right. And those are for things like the horrible Colin Kaepernick or the horrible Harrison Butker. And to me, it's like, to be principled, you have to be able to see it on both sides. And that's why it's important to me whenever we have these like discussions about Harrison Butker, and I know I watch you fucking grimace at me coming out on the side of free speech when it comes to Harrison Butker, even though I don't.
He can say what he wants. This is the thing. I don't think, with a guy like Harrison Butker, great example, probably a better example than Duran, because I think Duran,
he's a horrible example. Duran is not an example of a free speech violation in any way.
Go-to when talking to another person is to use words that everybody agrees and knows are really off color at this point in time, then he's probably kind of a piece of shit. But Harrison Butker, he might not be a piece of shit. For all we know, he might be like the nicest guy in the world who just has antiquated values that don't necessarily align with everybody else in the world. And that's fine. Sometimes I think we just need to kind of look at this a little bit more practically, where it's like, if people act shitty, the instinct that we have now is to destroy their lives forever. If they act shitty once, we want to destroy their lives forever. Well, that's kind of not how it works. There's a lot of shitty people out there that never face consequences for the things that they do. We're not trying to ruin their lives necessarily. Yeah. We often just live with the way that they behave. It's like when it's somebody of any kind of public stature, or in many cases at this point in time, you don't even have to have public stature. The world will make you public if they decide that you are acting out of order enough, right? Sure. And when we see this kind of thing pop up, we want to ruin the livelihood of those people. Now, you could argue that somebody like Jarren Duran, for example, doesn't deserve to be wealthy or doesn't deserve to have the career opportunities he has because he's shitty, but we don't know. That's just the reality. He had one gigantic fuck up that I think we can all agree was very bad, and he shouldn't have said that. But we can all agree on that. But we don't know if he's shitty or not. We don't know if he deserves the things he has or not. And it's not up to us to decide. It's not up to us to decide that.
I'll go even one further on this, which is Tim Hardaway. So when I was a kid, we had like a gay couple we were friends with. When I started voting, my number one issue as a voter was because I'm old enough that I voted in a time when gay marriage was not legal. So that was like number one thing for me. And by the way, neither major party candidate did I ever elect with the idea that, or did I ever vote for with them supporting gay marriage. But that was my number one issue. That was never, by the way, no fucking politicians supported it. I mean, there was like a few, Bernie Sanders being one, but like Barack Obama was publicly against gay marriage when he got elected. So I'm sensitive to this issue is my point. What I'm saying is remember when Tim Hardaway came out and said things that were patently homophobic? Chris Broussard said things that were patently homophobic, but they weren't slurs. They weren't directed at the fans of the product. These were opinions on society, and these guys are allowed to have these opinions. And I think that like these guys aren't passing legislation. You know what I mean? Like these guys, if we find out that they're discriminating against people based on their sexuality, that's a different thing. But if they have opinions on the way other people should live their lives, so do I. Mine don't align with Chris Broussard's and Tim Hardaway's, but I also have opinions, and I don't think those guys should be persecuted for those opinions. They can be mocked, and they can be ridiculed, and they can be debated against, and all these things, but they shouldn't like be forced into prison or never allowed to be employed again because by the way, like I've said this on here, there's a lot of dudes driving forklifts that if you start, legislating homophobia among forklift drivers, you're not going to have a lot of forklift drivers left. Like it's these like luxury jobs that we decide are worth talking about. And so anyways, to end the point is because I want to play the home run game because you have this hard out, and I don't think we have any topics that I care about enough to talk about after that. Yeah, this is not a free speech issue. This is an issue where this guy is insulting a customer of baseball, maybe of the Red Sox. In this time, I could have looked up, was it at Fenway Park? Was it not at Fenway Park? Also, jersey sales have gone up as he got suspended. This one's cut and dry for me. And again, I don't think we need to ruin the dude's life. I don't think this dude, in the same way that like, what's that dude, the fucking reliever, Josh, whatever his name is, the lefty that throws hard that had the like racist tweets many years ago.
John Rocker.
Not John Rocker. He had a racist interview.
Oh, Josh Hader. Yeah,
Josh Hader. We got a lot of
There's
racists.
a long list of Major League. I mean, it's very funny that, the people that seem to align themselves with the way Jarren Duran wants to live his life go out and buy his jersey. It's like, look, if the curtain was really pulled back, you'd realize that most of Major League Baseball is probably in line with Duran. It's like you guys found one guy to support. It's like,
well, Duran maybe guys, not to kind of get to like the point we were making a little bit earlier. Duran may not even actually be homophobic. He used a slur to hurt someone's feelings. And that's like, that doesn't necessarily make him homophobic.
I was talking about this the other day. Growing up in the era we did when people were tossing that word around like anything, they use that all the time. In middle school, I always thought it was just a really bad insult word because it's like you either are or you aren't, right? Like it's like, and if I'm not, then it's like it's not really an insult. Whereas if you called me like a bitch, I could be acting like a bitch. Anybody can act like a bitch.
Sure. I think
or an asshole. If you call me an asshole, like
this is certainly, we don't have enough time to dig deep into this topic. I'm happy to at another time, the next time a famous athlete or a not really that famous athlete calls someone a homophobic slur, we can get a little deeper in this because I do have some nuanced opinions of it and a similar experience of like a reckoning with what that word means to certain people and how bad it is in the hierarchy of slurs. But now we have to play the home run game. We cannot continue talking about Jarren Duran. Thank you for letting me, by the way, get my point out because hopefully I like to go on both sides of it and then land on somewhere in the middle.